Alright, this is John Cole with OKRAW.com. Today we have another exciting episode for you. And in this episode, what we're going to be talking about is a topic that I don't generally talk about on my channel. It's a topic of veganism and being vegan. Now, this channel is actually called OKRAW. None of my channels are, a vegan channel per se. That being said, I do teach a plant-based message. I encourage everybody out there watching this episode to eat more plants and eat way less animals. And some people might think I'm a sellout because I'm not preaching a 100% all vegan diet all the time and all this kind of stuff. And in this episode, I hope to cover, my opinions on this topic. And it's actually quite complex. And like my other videos, it's going to be long. So stay tuned. And remember, you got a little gear spoke on the bottom corner of the YouTube that you could click and listen to me at 2 times speed. So you could listen to this information at half the time if you so desire. And once again, if you guys want a vegan channel, there's many different vegan channels out there. Sometimes I feel because I'm not a vegan channel, I don't get as many views as maybe I should have or think I should, because I personally believe I have a very important message. Not to say that any vegan channels don't, but I don't necessarily agree with how some of the vegan channels go along with promoting their message. If you guys are looking for a really excellent vegan channel, I do recommend Mike the Vegan. I'll put a link down below if I remember. Mike actually, they're right up here. Mike actually has a really good, nice vegan channel that I like. He's a pretty level-headed guy and just basically tells you like it is. In any case, this video was spurred on by a recent rash of comments I've been getting in some of my videos, and especially a comment that was in my last video, and I'll go ahead and read it for you. It's from Robert Gross. John, why be a sellout to mainstream culture by saying it's okay to eat meat, fish, and eggs, just reduce the quantity? Jake may stick to his convictions and practices what he preaches with no animal products in his diet. But you are compromising your lifestyle by accepting what other people are eating instead of promoting a total plant-based diet. You are not serious about changing people's diets and lifestyle. Just growing your own food is not enough for a sustainable planet. Sorry, you cannot be more sincere like Jake. Very disappointed you missed the big picture. Tat sat. I don't know what that means. In another video, he made a different comment. John, we also live in Northern California, but you should not sell out by encouraging meat eating. Our whole planet is being destroyed by factory farming animals and consumption of animal products, and harmful to our health and animals, not at all necessary for healthy, karma-free lifestyle in harmony with nature. So this is what Robert Gross had wrote in my comments. Another comment on a recent video, it says, by bookmark this too. Wow, how can you condone eating meat? I never realized how plant-based and non-vegan you actually are. Alright, so, I've been called vegan, I've been called non-vegan before, all kinds of stuff, and I want to clear up some of these issues for you guys and kind of explain where I'm coming from and why I say the things I do, in case you want to learn or in case you're at all interested. It's what makes the most sense to me after being 22 years now on a raw food diet. Now, the first thing I want to say is that I never got into a vegan diet for the animals, right? That came along later. I originally got into a plant-based diet, eating fresh fruits and fresh vegetables in their raw, ripe, natural, and minimally processed state because of my health. I had a health crisis, I almost lost my life, and I learned that by eating the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet, which are unprocessed plant foods, and this is why I don't like, just being vegan, because you could include a lot of processed vegan junk foods, which in my opinion are not helping the planet either, and are not good for your health either. And that's what I got into, right, for my health, and I learned that it really worked. And that's what I've been doing now since 1995, and that's what I encourage everybody to do as much as they can of. Alright, so that's point number one. Point number two is, pretty early on, within the first couple years of me being on a raw plant-based diet, I was exposed more to the vegan message. There's a movie I watched, we'll put it up there, known as The Witness. And this was the first vegan documentary film that really kind of actually made me cry and think about the impact that my diet had on other creatures on the planet. You know, since then I've seen many other documentaries. You know, Earthlings was another one, we'll put it up there, that comes to mind. You know, just to think about, you know, not only just us, but about other creatures, big and small, on the planet. And, you know, I recommend these documentaries to you guys because maybe it'll make a shift in you like it did for me. And, you know, that just basically convinced me that, hey, John, you're on a plant-based, whole food diet, fresh fruits and vegetables. You know, hey, that's really great. I don't want any harm to come from animals, and I know these foods are not necessary for me. So, you know, I went about my business, and especially when a lot of you guys are new into veganism, you just learned about this stuff, you're really like gung-ho. I want to convert the world, man. Oh my God, I can't believe I didn't know this information before, that millions of animals die every year, and all this happens needlessly, and they're slaughtered, and their throats are slit, and they're cut up even when they're still living. All this like horrific stuff, right? I do not condone that at all. I don't want any animals to die needlessly, and far too many animals die on a daily basis. It's totally insane. So, you know, right when I got into it and I learned all this information, I want to tell everybody. Like, I know a lot of you guys want to too. You know, you want to tell everybody. And so you tell your friends, you tell your neighbors, but unfortunately, you know, you're met with sometimes blank faces and sometimes just a wall. And sometimes, you know, especially with friends and family, things go in one ear and it just goes out the other. You know, they just don't listen to you. I mean, I remember going to a Thanksgiving, and this is when I was like, I think I probably just saw the documentary, and it was like a couple months later, and I went to a Thanksgiving, and I brought my vegan stuff to eat, you know, raw food, salads, and all this stuff, enough to share with everybody. And they're serving a dead turkey, right? And in the middle of Thanksgiving dinner, and this was inappropriate for me to do at the time, which I look back on now, and I feel bad that I did that. But I started saying, how could you guys be eating like a dead animal carcass? This animal had to die, it's not healthy for you, and you're sitting here eating it and enjoying it. I mean, it's like almost like being a cannibal or something like that. And like they just like thought I was just like the weird, whacked out dude. And it just wasn't a fun place to be because they just didn't understand. I was just trying to get them to understand. And to this day, probably those cousins and stuff, they maybe don't like me so much, and we don't talk so much. Probably because of that. So, you know, it put a divide between us. And since that time, guess what? They haven't made any dietary changes, despite them getting older in age and, you know, probably having some health challenges like every other American in life. And so I got to ask myself now, after, you know, that happening maybe 20 odd years ago, was that the right approach to take? Probably not, right? So, you know, after I had that experience, then I kind of learned, you know what, John, maybe you should just shut up about your diet. Because you know what, nobody wants to be preached to, especially when you try to preach to somebody and you try to tell them the word of God or the word of veganism or whatever kind of ism or belief system that you have. People tend to shut down. You know, they're just not ready for the message, right? They're not ready to be saved or whatever, you know, whether it's religion or diet or politics or whatever it is, right? And so I've learned just to be quiet, you know, and not really tell anybody what I'm doing, especially, you know, when I'm there in person with people, you know, but more importantly, to live by example and just do what I do. And if people are interested, then they'll ask me what I'm doing, and then I'll be glad to share with them and tell them what I'm doing, right? And so that's what I did for many years, you know, and then finally, you know, some of my parents had some health challenges, and I was trying to convince my parents for many years. Like, I think it took me like 10 years, and maybe they ate a little bit more fruits and vegetables, but they really didn't change. They didn't really become vegan until they started having some health challenges. And then my parents started listening to me because, you know, by this time I had a good track record. I'd been doing it for 10 years. I'm still like that same, you know, height and weight. I was basically in high school, you know, and people are getting all kinds of old age diseases. My brother was getting some health challenges. Anyways, my parents had some health challenges. Said, John, what can I do? And so I sent my dad to True North Health Center. I'm going to put a picture up there. And to see Dr. Goldhammer and my friend Dr. Rick Dina, who was working there at the time. And we got my dad on a 30-day water fast. And the 30-day water fast, where he actually didn't eat anything except drink distilled water for 30 days, actually helped his parathyroid condition, because he was producing too much PTH, and that helped him. But more importantly than just being on a fast, while he was in the fasting program, he was basically being converted, not by me, not by his son who he saw in diapers, but by the other doctors on the staff, both medical doctors and chiropractic doctors at True North Health Center, because they give you guys massive amounts of education. And I think especially when there's leverage, right, when people have a really strong need to change. Hey, my health is failing, I could lose my life, I need to do something or I'm going to lose my life. That's some leverage against them, and then they're more likely to be receptive to an idea. And to this day, that's why I find people who get into the diet and lifestyle generally, the plant-based diet, they don't get into because they saw an animal rights movie, and yeah, that might happen, for a percentage. But I think moreover, people get into this because of the health crisis they're having, and they want how to get themselves out of a hole they've already dug in from doing the wrong thing, which is eating animal foods in excess. More importantly than that, processed foods in excess. I mean, those are the two things that I hate most about our food system, aside from that it's all like, industrial processed and packaged foods, which is a total sham, but that's a whole nother topic. So finally got my parents to convert over, and it wasn't necessarily me, it was the doctors, at the center with all the education, but more importantly, my dad specifically had some leverage, so actually he made changes, whereas my mom was still, not really on the message, and my dad would eat special vegetarian, raw, vegan stuff, actually, and my mom would still eat her chicken and stuff every once in a while, until my mom had some health challenges, maybe another 5-10 years later, and then I sent them back to True North for actually a juice fast, which helped them a lot, and then they got on track again, but then later after they left there, my mom started going to just a standard naturopath who says, oh, you need to eat your meat. So then she listened to him and started eating smaller amounts of meat again, although they eat, a good solid plant-based diet. But in my opinion, unfortunately, it's just too much processed food still. I mean, even if you're eating a vegan diet, that's not the best diet in the world, because you're still eating a high percentage, in most cases, of processed foods. And I want you guys to eat a whole foods, plant-based diet, dominated in fruits and vegetables, which are the best foods on the planet. And if you want to know really what diet I recommend the most out of any diet, it'd actually be a nutritarian diet, which is not necessarily even an all raw diet. It's, a high raw diet with all high nutrient dense plant foods. I think that's probably one of the best diets if you don't want to be all raw, because if you want to be all raw, then you got to actually work a little bit extra harder, to make sure that you're going to be healthy, because there's really a lot of ways to do a raw foods diet to your peril, in my opinion. So yeah, I've learned over the years that it's really hard to convert somebody, and walls go up, and people are guarded when you just tell them, go all vegan. Plus, the other thing, if you guys watch my show, a lot, that I'm really, I have a few different teaching styles and things I like to teach. For my brother, for example, he knows what I do. I had spinal meningitis when I got younger. I almost lost my life. I got out of the hospital and said, John, how can you turn your health around? How can you turn your this genetic weakness that the doctor said you had, called complement immune deficiency, which you could get another disease and lose your life at any time. How could you turn this around? Well, hey, that's why I found a plant-based, high nutrient, fruit and vegetable dominated diet. And unfortunately, my brother actually, or fortunately, had the same exact situation. He had spinal meningitis just like me, and when he got out of the hospital, he called me because he knew what I did and what I found, and he said, John, what do I do? I said, well, get out that juice I gave you for last Christmas and start juicing every day. So he kept it up for a week. He lost weight, felt better, but then after about a week, he couldn't do it because he fell back into the peer pressures of society. And the peer pressures of society are really strong. I know there's a lot of you guys out there watching right now that, John, I want to go vegan, but every time I go to work and people are eating cheeseburgers or they're making fun of me because I'm eating rabbit food, it's really difficult to deal with, and then I backslide and I just eat the normal stuff again, right? And I've seen this happen over many years, and even my brother, right, he doesn't eat that healthy. Let's face it, he still eats out of fast food and junk food and all this other junk. But what I tell everybody, besides even my brother and everybody else, is the motto that I like to give is good, better, best, right? Good, better, best, right? We all can't be perfect 100% vegans eating 100% vegan all the time. In my opinion, that's just unrealistic. You know, for the course of man throughout history, there's been no culture that has been exclusively 100% vegan and grown all their food 100% vegan any time in the course of history. So in that respect, it's actually quite an unnatural diet. Now, I will say that all along history, just because there wasn't any vegans, right, doesn't mean we shouldn't eat vegan or we shouldn't eat a lot of plants, because if we look back at history also, what can we learn is that most peoples in the world ate high percentages of nutrient-dense plant foods over the majority that that man has been on the planet. And they ate smaller amounts of, animal products and even bugs and insects and all these things, but lots of plants. So if you're like on a paleo diet right now, right, don't focus on just the meat, right? You're focusing in the wrong area. You want to focus on the plants and eat very little meat, right? And that's what ancient man did. And so once again, good, better, best. So like my brother, right? Instead of eating fast food 3 times a day, it's horrible. If I could just get him to make a smoothie in the morning, that's one meal, right? Jim, just make a smoothie in the morning. Right now his blender broke actually because his wife broke the blender, so I got to give him a new one maybe this weekend. But if I just get him to eat a smoothie in the morning and then he eats 2 fast food meals, hey man, I got him to improve his diet 33%. That's 33% less animals he's eating because he's not eating bacon and eggs or anything for breakfast. And maybe for lunch, he could go out to Chipotle instead of going to McDonald's. And at Chipotle, maybe, just maybe, if I'm lucky, because he knows he could get the vegetarian option in Chipotle for being a fast food joint. It's a much better fast food joint than, say, McDonald's or Jack in the Box or even Taco Bell, right? He could have more of a whole food plant-based burrito with rice and beans, which are some pretty good vegan cooked foods, because he's not a raw foodist. Let's not kid ourselves, and he's never going to be a vegan. Let's not kid ourselves, unless maybe he has some health crisis where he's going to totally lose his life, unless he totally is really motivated to do it. And maybe for dinner he'll have a little bit of an extra salad, because he knows his brother grows his own food in his front yard and in his backyard, and he harvests it, and he knows that his brother's in a healthy, fit weight range. And meanwhile, my brother, he was been clinically obese, labeled clinically obese by his doctor. And so maybe, just maybe, I could get my brother, who I love dearly, just to eat like that much more plant foods and reduce that amount of animal foods. And that's gonna be better for him. It's also gonna be better for the animals, because let's face it, he's not gonna go 100% vegan. And in my opinion, my brother is kind of like the greater world, the greater people in the world. I see people with shopping carts in front of me every day of the week at the grocery store, right? It makes me sad. I mean, I get sad. I see him in the store. They have like a shopping cart full of like dead animals, eggs and dairy. Do I like it? I'm not sitting there getting jollies off it, man. I got all my fruits and vegetables. Number one, they're wasting their money. Dude, that's like so expensive. They're buying like so much little food, maybe more calories. That's also why they're bigger. For twice as much as I spend on my fruits and vegetables that are more water content, more healthy. And so I'm saving money, eating healthier foods, and all these people are causing death and destruction, not only to themselves, but to the animals as well, which I do have a heart for. I'm not going to say that, I don't like to see animals suffer or die needlessly. I don't want that to happen, right? But I also, on the other hand, am a realist to know that everybody's not going to go 100% vegan at the same time. So I want to share some stories with you guys actually now about, why I've come to the realization that I do, knowing that, I don't want animals to die, but yet I don't encourage everybody to eat a 100% vegan diet. I mean, hey, if you guys could do a 100% vegan diet, I will never dissuade you from doing it. I think that's the best way to go, but not just a vegan diet, right? I want you guys to eat a nutrient-dense, fruit and vegetable dominated, whole food, minimally processed, plant-based, or call it vegan if you will, diet. But anyways, fast forward now, I don't know, maybe like 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 7, I forget how many years ago now, maybe 10 years, because time flies when you're having fun. But actually I went to the Vegetarian Summerfest, right? Back then I was a single guy. I was like, man, what better place to meet a nice single vegetarian or vegan girl than a Vegetarian Summerfest? Because I've always heard about it. They've had them every year for, 20 years, and I never went to one. And I never really thought I fit into the whole vegan group because I was a raw foodist, right? And raw foodists, they're the worst thing that happened to veganism since veganism was invented, right? A lot of vegans will say, because they get people into eating plant-based diet, but then they also get people out of eating a plant-based diet and go back to animals and all kinds of other junk foods and stuff, or so they say, and there's reasons for this also. But anyways, I went to a lot of different talks and conferences and lectures while I was at the Vegetarian Summerfest, and one of the talks I saw was Dr. Michael Clapper, right? Dr. Michael Clapper, we all know him, right? He's famous. But I went to Dr. Clapper's, talk, and, I'd always been like, private vegan. I've been, vegan, doing my own thing, eating plants and stuff, not really sharing it with so many people. I mean, I go out and talk and speak and stuff, and I don't think I even had a YouTube channel back then. But I would just do what I did, and if people asked me what I did, I'd share, and, whatever. But at his talk, basically, he talked about a concept, instead of trying to convert the whole world to 100% vegan, is just trying to convert like 80% of the world to like 90% vegan or 80% vegan, right? Because he said that if you do this, there's going to be more animals that are saved, and it's going to also be more sustainable for the planet. And not to say that he just wants people to go 80% vegan. He would rather have people go 100% vegan, but he says if you can't do that, then go 80%, right? And so when he said that, it's like a light bulb went off in my head. It's like, wow, that's a better way to do things. So let me give you some statistics here for those of you guys that are into math and want to save the most number of animals, right? So the rough statistics that I got is, if you eat vegan for a whole year, you're going to save approximately 200 animals, plus or minus, maybe 185, maybe 195, maybe 210, I don't know. But basically the statistic out there is if you are vegan, you save 200 animals' lives a year, or ones that you wouldn't have had to eat, and hopefully, because our supply chain is supply and demand, hopefully they're not being grown even. And good enough, I think, lately I think the meat consumption, or well, especially red meat consumption, have been going down, but chicken's been going up. But that's aside from the point. So for example, say of all my subscribers that watch all my different YouTube channels, however many they are, I'm just going to make it nice, easy numbers. Say I had like 100 people watching me, right? And of the 100 people that I tell them to go all vegan, I get 10%, to go vegan, which actually is a really high number, because I think the population overall, maybe like 1% is vegan in the USA, and maybe in other places it's like 4 or 5, it depends, 3, 4, or 5. But say at 10%, I got conversion, right? So then I'd get 10 people vegan out of 100 people that watched me or whatever, and that would save, 200 animals each, so that's 200 times 10, that would save 2,000 animals from dying because I promoted an all-vegan diet. But, at the same time, I'm converting 10 people, and they're going to do it. 90 people are not going to do it because I'm some freaked out, wacko, nut job that wants to get people to be all vegan. Or nothing, or you're worthless and you're scum because you kill animals, right? And so after hearing Dr. Clapper's talk, he said that made sense to me. So let's give the other example, right? If my subscriber base, or well, my subscriber base in this instance is 100 people, but I think overall my subscriber base across all my channels are getting close to 600,000 people. That's over 500,000 people, and some people are duplicates, so probably like 500,000 people. If I got maybe just 50% of them to convert to being 90% vegan, because that's a much more attainable fact, and they hear me when I say, hey, eat more plants, eat more fruits and vegetables, and if you're going to eat meat, which I don't recommend, eat no more than 10% of your calories from animal products, right? So then they could be considered 90% vegan, right? Now, a 90% vegan person is going to basically save 180 pounds, or 180 animals, sorry, a year, and then you times that by 50 times 180, now overall I'm saving 9,000 animals a year because people went 90% vegan instead of going all vegan, but 90% vegan is a lot more attainable for people, or even if you don't even go 90%, 80%, even if you just cut your meat consumption in half, because hey, crazy guy John says, hey, I shouldn't probably be eating meat and I should eat more vegetables, and you just eat more vegetables, and by eating more vegetables and more plant foods, you're just automatically going to displace other foods you're eating, and hopefully that's displacing the animal foods that are not so healthy for you, right? So in the end, that's going to save more animals, and it's more attainable for people to do, right? And so, not that I'm like sitting here counting beans or counting numbers. I've never figured out this stupid math until today, until I had to make this video, because people chastise me for being a sellout, which I'm not. What I'm doing is I'm sharing my personal beliefs and my opinions, and sharing what I think and what is attainable to people, right? And I'm, hey, if you want to be all vegan, that's totally up to you. I want to encourage you guys always to go for it and eat as many plant products as you guys can. Now, a few other things came into my light and came into my awareness that I also want to share with you guys over the years. So, being a vegan, and I got into gardening, and not only just being, plant-based raw foodist, I got into growing my own food, which then took it up a level for me, which really kind of opened my eyes. And then right when I got into gardening, I'm like, yeah, I could be a vegan gardener too, because I'm a vegan, right? And then it's like, I'd see how to do gardening vegan, and you could do veganic gardening, absolutely, no problem. You got to do rock dust, and you got to be more prudent, about some of the amendments you use, and being careful about what you're doing, and making sure you got enough organic matter and fungal dominated compost and all these different things. And you could totally do a veganic gardening. But then I thought about, like, how natural is a veganic garden? Like, show me in nature somewhere where it's only veganic gardening. So I'm like, wow. Although one of my beliefs is like the whole vegan lifestyle and veganic gardening and veganism, which is like a belief system, once again, much like, religion is a belief system, or politics are belief systems. It's a belief system where you don't use animal products or manures or whatever in your gardening. But I thought about, like, okay, so that's great in a box, like in this artificial construct known as the matrix that we live in. You could totally do that if you want. But if you look out to the forest, out to nature, there's no such thing as a vegan system, right? We are all interconnected on nature. The plants, the bugs, the animals, insects, protozoa, the bacteria, we're all connected, and nothing lives in an isolated box. And so this went directly against, my veganism and upright, growing up or whatever, when I was getting into this stuff. And then I had to rationalize in my head, John, how could you be like growing your food and then you use some manure? Like, is that all right? And so, like, my goal as a gardener is actually not to use animal products, not to use manure, especially don't use blood meal or bone meal, especially porcine or cow meal, some of the worst stuff. But in nature, if a cow keeled over and lost its life in the forest, right, animals would come and eat it, it would rot down, and it would feed the earth. So, I mean, we're trying to, like, it's not totally natural to live all vegan. And animals lose their lives, and worms are in my garden beds pooping, and is worm poop manure, and is it not vegan? It just gets so complicated, and you gotta like worry about all these things, right? So I wanna talk about that a little bit more. So, number one, let's talk about the definition of veganism, and this is by the Vegan Society in the UK, who started veganism actually way back when. And basically, the definition of veganism is a way of living which seeks to exclude, as far as possible and practicable, all forms of exploitation of and cruelty to animals for food, clothing, or any other purpose. So I think the keywords there for me are possible and practicable, right? And hey, that's great. If you want to live in a vegan box and just not do any of that stuff, that's totally up to you, right? I on the other hand, grew up eating a raw foods diet, or that's what I got into, and that's like more natural to me in some ways than processing and cooking food. And so I'm just trying to live my life in accordance the best way I can, having the least effect on animals and other creatures on the planet. I mean, I've had topics about this before. I'm not really going to get into it. I'll put a link down below to 2 videos I did, you know, why I'm not vegan and neither are you, is a topic I had before. And I had another video where I actually went to my vegan. She's not vegan because she keeps her own bees, and she keeps bees in a, you know, a compassionate way. I consider her vegan, but then people would not call her vegan because she keeps bees and whatnot. But there's better and worse ways to do things. I mean, if you're eating a vegan diet and you're buying conventional produce or even organic produce, man, they're spraying, let's not kid ourselves, they're spraying the fields with insecticides, whether that's organic insecticides or conventional pesticides made out of petrochemicals to kill the bugs so you could have bug-free lettuce, right? My girlfriend complains that sometimes the bok choy that I grow has little caterpillars or little aphids or little whiteflies on them, and she has to pick them off and put them outside, right? I mean, this is just how nature works, right? And okay, so in an ideal world, if you had proper soil with the best nutrition and good worm castings with high chitin content, you could actually grow food that the insects would not be attracted to eat, because you'd be growing food for humans, not food for insects that are of lower quality, and that's aside from the point. But I'm just trying to do the best I can, right? Just the best I can, and just try to fit in all these different belief systems into like one cohesive kind of like thing that I do in my life. So, you know, I don't want to cause any excess harm to any kind of animals. I don't want them to die for my food. Do I kill some bugs sometimes in my garden so that I could eat my plants? Yes, I do. So don't call me a vegan if you don't want to. You know, knowing what I know, you know, I kill far less bugs and have higher quality food than if you're buying conventionally grown or even organic food where big mass industrial farms are just spraying their crops with all kinds of stuff. I don't tend to spray anything unless it's an absolute bad outbreak and I must spray. And so I'm killing way less bugs. So I try to like just leave a lighter footprint on the planet. So another story I wanted to talk about was actually once again at the vegetarian summerfest I went to. I think that was in Pennsylvania one year, where I saw Dr. Clapper. I also met a very interesting girl. So this girl, she was a vegan, right? And so I'm a raw vegan, and she was a vegan, but she was a little bit different vegan. I never met anybody like this before, and it really got me to think a lot, actually. She was a vegan who wouldn't eat anything that wasn't clean and in a package, right? She wouldn't eat an apple. She wouldn't go out and pick dandelions out of the garden and eat them because it's dirty, right? She'd only buy things that are wrapped up, made in a factory, and clean. It was like, that was like totally whacked me out. Like, oh my God, like, what is veganism doing to people? It makes them all super paranoid. Maybe she has some other issues too. But, you know, her whole thing was it has to be vegan and it has to be in a package, you know, and I'm like, okay, so yes, I want it to be plant-based. It has to be fruits and vegetables. It has to be as fresh as possible, and I'd rather pick it. And actually, I don't want it in a package, right? So being vegan is not necessarily a solution to everything. And, you know, I think, especially after growing my own food, I really see the big challenges that any industrialized agriculture system, whether they're growing industrial agriculture animals, which is horrific for the planet, horrific for the animals, and it's very resource intensive, or, you know, even so, places that are growing industrial agriculture plant foods, right? They're better, but still not that good. That's not the answer. Industrialized food is not the answer, where big tracts of land are being monocropped with single items so that you guys could eat them, right? And so by growing my own food in a diverse permaculture, food forest style setting, you know, it's a much more sustainable way to do things where you don't have to actually ship and truck food for thousands of miles to get to you. So, you know, that's a experience that I have that most other vegans don't, because, you know, I mean, as much as I would want all vegans to grow some of their own food, you know, I think a smaller percentage do, unfortunately. Most of them are just worried about not harming any animals, and they just buy their vegan packaged junk foods, and they're happy with it, right? And I want to try to push people like that into starting to grow their own food to kind of realize these things, and then they could start questioning and finding out for themselves, hey, I got worms in my garden. Am I now not a vegan because they're pooping and my plants are absorbing them? Hey, I'm growing food in my garden now, and now I got bugs. What do I do with the bugs? Do I pick off the slugs and throw them over the fence to the neighbor's house and get the neighbor pissed off at you because I don't want to kill them? Or do I kill the slugs? Because otherwise, if I don't kill the slugs are going to eat all my leafy greens, and I won't have any leafy greens out of my garden, and I'm going to have to buy stuff from the store. Or I got cucumber beetles, and all the cucumber beetles are eating all my squash and cucumbers, and now I can't have any cucumbers and squash unless I kill them, control them, or spray them. And it's like, the world is full of complex problems. And so the solution I've come up with is basically do the best you can. And that's another topic that I want to cover in this video today. It's my whole belief of being convergent, which is coming to a point and having, this is the way, veganism is the way, or being more divergent, right? And divergent is that there's many different answers and many different answers to a problem, many paths to the one solution, or many paths, or many ways you can get to your destination versus just one way. And actually my last video was pretty much about being divergent or convergent. Was too little or too much. Too much is like being convergent, like you gotta be all vegan, or you could be too little vegan, or I want people to just have like a spectrum of a range. One of my favorite talks is a talk I gave about a continuum, along a continuum, where I want you guys to just move beyond the point in the continuum you are to get better, whether that means, eliminating more animal products for you, especially the dairy. Dairy is probably the worst animal product for your health that you guys could be eating. It's also quite harmful for the animals themselves. Or whether you're vegan now and move along your continuum to grow more of your own food and be a more sustainable producer. So, I have a really multifaceted approach, and, I don't want to exclude anybody. And I feel that a lot of vegans, especially, exclude a lot of people because you're in this exclusive vegan club. And evidently I've been kicked out of that vegan club because I've been called non-vegan so many times, and that's fine, And when that happens, right, I'll tell you what happens to me personally. When you say that I'm not vegan, guess what? Does that make me want to go out and eat a hamburger? No, not necessarily, because I wouldn't do that because it's not good for my health. But it as hell doesn't want me to be vegan anymore and call myself plant-based instead. And I don't, and it makes me even more so want to encourage people not to be 100% vegan because they're so judgmental and they're mean sometimes. And I don't think being mean to people is a way to get people to do what you want them to do, right? I think to be understanding and compassionate, and more importantly, meet people where they're at. Unfortunately, not everybody is at a point in their life where they're ready to go 100% vegan right now, right today. And I think people are at a point in their lives today to make steps in the right direction, to buy a juicer and to start juicing, right? That's one of my favorite ways to get people into eating more plants. I'm not saying they have to give up their meat, but hey, if they stop eating breakfast and make a fresh vegetable juice or even a fruit juice for breakfast, and now instead of drinking, their milk with eggs and bacon, they're drinking a vegetable juice, I just got them eating more plants. I've succeeded, right? And my goal is to not convert the whole world vegan. I don't really care if the whole world goes vegan. But what I do want people to do is I want them to eat more fruits and vegetables. The most important plant foods. And by eating more fruits and vegetables, you're going to automatically displace the other foods. So I think I covered most of the points that I want to cover today about this topic. So hopefully you'll understand me better and why I just do what I do and why I say what I say. Once again, I want everybody out there that's able to go vegan, that doesn't have a problem with it, hey, to go vegan, or actually I like to say plant-based, to eat more plants, and especially the most important plants, because that's what I've learned in my life. Not all plant foods are created equal, not all vegan foods are created equal. I want you guys to focus on the fruits and vegetables, whole, unprocessed plant foods. And if you're going to process them, process them in your house. And more importantly, besides processing them, I want you guys to grow them too. It's quite unique that I'm actually a plant-based eater, vegan, whatever you want to call me, who eats raw, who actually grows his own food, and a good percentage of that as well, because there's not many people doing it. Another thing I would encourage all you guys to do before you make any comments that are negative, right? Take a look at yourself and what you're doing to get people to eat more plants. I know the commenter that made a few of the comments that spurred this video, and he has 1 subscriber on YouTube, and I don't even think he has any videos, right? I mean, what are you doing to get people to eat more plants than just to make mean comments at me that I'm not promoting 100% veganism, right? Next thing I want to say is that veganism, it's a belief system, right? And in the whole of human history, there's been no documented vegan tribes or peoples of the world that I've seen. So being vegan, on another hand, is also an experiment. And so I know for the non-vegans out there, they'll say, well, yeah, veganism is an experiment, man. Nobody's ever done that, so you shouldn't do it. Well, so nobody's ever done that because in past days, they haven't have the access to the food resources, the trucking, the shipping, the industrial farming that we have now, so that we can do this if you so choose to do it. And even that being said, there are many ways to do veganism, and in my opinion, a lot of those ways are actually, and most of the ways that are being taught, especially some of the vegan chefs and even raw food chefs making videos out there, they piss me off because they're teaching you unhealthy stuff. And just to say because it's vegan, it's all right, I don't agree with that, man. I'm almost like, in some ways, I'm anti-vegan because, something could potentially be healthy that it's actually not vegan than something that's all vegan. Say you make a fruit and vegetable based dish that has mostly fruits and vegetables with a little bit of meat, it's way healthier than some highly processed, isolated soy, isolated processed, textured vegetable protein in a bun, right? Once again, good, better, best. I want to try to meet you guys where you guys are at, and I want to always encourage you guys to do the best you can. And in summary, I want to sum up like this. I want to let you guys know, if you can do it, hey, eat 100% plant-based diet. That's the best, in its raw, natural state as much as possible, concentrating on the fruits and vegetables. That's really good. That's what I do. I don't expect anybody else to do this. I go through a lot of trials and tribulations to source my food, to grow my food half the day to day. I was actually in the garden, and a lot of you guys probably wouldn't want to spend time in the garden. I go out, to different places, like 10 places in a day to shop and buy food from all over to make sure I get some good high quality stuff. I do a lot of research to make sure that I'm not deficient in nutrients. I get blood testing and, make sure that I'm dialing in. And, if you want to eat some animal products, what I recommend, and I've said this before, don't be a pussy and just go buy animal products at the store, at the grocery store if you want to eat animal products. That's not the way to do it. Industrial farmed animal products are really not good for the planet. They're definitely really not good for you. If you want to eat meat, I encourage you guys to grow it yourself, because I also grow my own food. I've been to places that keep chickens, that keep, pigs and rabbits, and they slaughter them for food. Do I believe in this? Do I believe this is right? I do not believe it's right. Do I believe it's a better alternative than buying something at the grocery store? Absolutely. To say no to that would be kidding myself. Do I want them to kill their animals for food? I absolutely do not. Is it my place to tell them, hey Chris, you shouldn't be killing your rabbits to eat them? That's fucked up, man. I could think what I want. He's going to eat meat, whether it's from killing his own rabbits or from going to the store and buying it and being pussy, in my opinion. And honestly, I'd rather have people kill their own animals, raise them as pets, kill their own animals, and eat them if they choose to eat meat. Why would I say this? Well, number one, because I've seen the CAFOs and industrial animal agriculture systems, how it's just very unsustainable, how they pump up the animals full of hormones, drugs, antibiotics, and even more importantly, GMO corn and grains, and more importantly, food that has been grown with biosolids that's probably contaminated with heavy metals, and if you're eating fish and whatnot, oh, John, I eat fish. Well, hey, the oceans are contaminated too, and animals are dynamic concentrators, and they concentrate these toxins. So that's not a better option either. But at least if you raise your own animals, you could feed them organic grain that has not been fed you're not feeding them biosolid, GMOs, right? Also, you don't have to give them antibiotics, right? So you could also give them a much nicer life at home than an animal agriculture place would just fill, a chicken coop with 1,000 chickens. They could barely move around, which is totally messed up. I don't agree with that either. And then at the end of that process, when you're taking care of your animal, they're your pet, you love them like your little dog, like I love my dog, you would then slaughter them and take their lives so that you could eat them. And, so all the processes are pretty fine up to that point where you're taking care of your animals, feed them a good diet, loving them until you kill them. And, I could never do that. And it's my personal belief that if most people to eat meat, if they had to kill their own animals that were their pets that they raised for 5 years, 1 year, to fatten them up or whatever, they couldn't do it. Like, they just couldn't do it. And then they'd have more pets, and then maybe they could start an animal rescue, right? I think it's hard to kill an animal, sentient being, for your consumption. I mean, yeah, more power to you if you guys are into that. I know some people are just raised to just not be compassionate or not, feel or something like that, because maybe that's the industry they're raised in, or that's just the way you do it. But I think one day, at least if you're raising your own animal, something might click in your head, and you're like, that guy John, maybe he's right. Maybe I don't need to eat or kill my own animals to eat them. And so, but see, the problem is, and especially with animals, when you buy the packaged food in the package, right, you don't see what goes on. You don't see how that animal was fed. You don't see how it was cared for. You don't see how it was raised. You just see it as a food product in a package, where you just take the food package out, you throw it on your grill, you grill it on up, and you eat it. And so I think that's another big problem in our society, is the whole food industry. I mean, whether that's the packaged food from animals, which death has come into play, or even more importantly, the packaged vegan food products, right? You don't know how that product was raised. You don't know what kind of nutrients were added to the soil. You don't know what was sprayed on the soil. You don't know if it has an organic sticker. You don't know if it's really truly organic. Maybe they paid somebody off just to get the organic sticker, and they're using biosolids to grow it, and they're spraying nasty, chemical pesticides that are not supposed to be used in organic agriculture on it, but you're just buying it because it's in a little package, and they processed the heck and took soy protein isolates and took these guar gums and took red dye number 6s and number 10s and put all these things in your food, and then you just buy it and you eat it without questioning. So I want you guys to question things, not only where your animal products are coming from and how they came to be and what has to happen to them, but how all your food products and processed food products came to be also. So, I think it's just, more like getting back to nature, knowing where your food comes from, and being involved in the process. I think the biggest problem today is that people are not involved with the process. And if people were involved with the process of growing their own food, whether that's, plants or animals, they would be a lot different, and things would be a lot different. And I think, the whole consumption model where we just go down and buy stuff and we take it for granted that, hey, this is what it is. People are just blinded to the whole process. And if you're a vegan animal rights person, you might try to make people watch a video or something. But I think it means a lot more when somebody actually has a cleaver and they got a live chicken that they've raised and they got to kill it. That's going to convert a lot more people to be vegan, in my opinion. So, that's basically what I think. I don't want to go on any longer. This video is already long enough. I'm getting hungry actually for some fruit. But if you guys enjoyed this format, hey, please be sure to give me a thumbs up. It'll encourage me to do them again. And hey, if you didn't like it, post your comments, your constructive comments down below, so that you can enlighten me and maybe I could grow as a person. I'm not here to make anybody upset. I'm just here to share my ideas, my thoughts, what I've learned over the time. Maybe it'll enrich you, maybe it won't. Maybe it'll enrage you, maybe it'll make you happy. I don't really know, but this is just me, and I'm just being honest with you guys. And I'd never basically do anything else, because it wouldn't be right for me. I wouldn't feel right doing that. And so this is just who I am. And take it or leave it. And that's pretty much it, right? There's a lot of other channels. If you guys are looking for a hardcore vegan message to watch, I'd recommend, once again, Mike the Vegan, one of my favorite guys out there. But yeah, I appreciate all you guys that have watched me and that have come this far. I do have a lot of good information to share that could help you move in a better direction, more sustainable, more healthy, healthier for the planet, as well as for the animals out there, and just sharing my beliefs once again. Also, be sure to click that subscribe button right down below so you don't miss out on any of my new and upcoming episodes I have coming out about every 5 to 7 days on this YouTube channel. Also, be sure to check my past episodes. My past episodes are a wealth of knowledge. Over 450 videos now on this channel dedicated to teaching you guys the best way to eat more fresh fruits and vegetables in your diet. So with that, my name is John Kohler with OKRAW.com. We'll see you next time. Until then, remember, keep eating your fresh fruits and vegetables. They're always the best.